Yay. Look at you in all your Saturday gorgeousness. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is, as far as I'm concerned, for us here, the beginning of our summer school. I do summer school every year just to keep myself occupied. I make these little themes. It just keeps me interested, feels like I have a direction. Then I forget about it in a week. But our summer school theme this year is the summer of the divine romance. So it really is about that sacred beloved, God. It's really, I think this is too loud, because it's like a little feedbacky. But you can still hear, right? Yay. So we talked a little bit last month about the various levels of consciousness. So we've talked so many times about the world is really all born into victim consciousness and really stays there, never leaves that realm. And then those of us who are in New Thought or anything that has to do with the recognition that our thoughts are creative and they're powerful and they really guide our perception, then you move out of that victim consciousness and you start to realize that you can use your thoughts to actually create your life. You're not a victim of circumstances or of birth or of the economy or any of those things. But we also realize that that is not yet a spiritual realm. That's still just a mental realm. So it's really just a realm still of human thought. So it is a level of thinking where it's still your will be done. So there's no God there yet. There's no God. The victim realm, that God is an imaginary God that doesn't exist, that does shit. So that's the God of Bibles and religions that think the Bible is a history book and that God does this or that. So the God that most of the world prays to does not exist. The God of fix this, smite my enemies, do this, do that is just Santa Claus. So there's no God there. There's no God in the mental realm because it's still me. I'm the God. I decide. And that is light years ahead of the victim realm, and it's a very fun realm. It's the realm of affirmations and treasure maps and name it and claim it and princes, palaces, and parking spaces. It's all about what do you want now? Now what do you want? 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 But there is no God there. That's not a spiritual realm. That is the realm that Hitler used. So Hitler was very much into these kinds of teachings of how you use mind to create. And so there's still no God in that realm. We don't really find God till we get to the third kingdom. And as you move from kingdom to kingdom, you always have to give something up to get to the next kingdom. So from victim consciousness to go into the mental realm, you have to give up shame and blame. That's why no one wants to leave there. Right? That's why it's like, oh, come on. Can't I still tell the story about how they did it to me? Not if you want to rise above this kingdom. So when you go from the second kingdom, the mental kingdom, to the spiritual kingdom, where you finally are in that place of divine wisdom, you have to give up personal self-will. Because you're going from my will to thy will. And the reason that we do that, and why we're relieved to do that, is because the victim kingdom is basically a place of just physical work all the time. So that's like if I work hard enough, I can make it happen, even if that means lying, cheating, stealing. If I'm dishonest, if I'm honest, maybe it's working, 80 hours a week and having lots of schemes and strategies and plans. So that's a place of a lot of effort. Then you move into the mental kingdom, and there's not so much physical effort because you realize that really you can use your thoughts. And you don't have to work so physically hard, but then after a while you realize it's a lot of mental work because you're always thinking. You used to be doing, then you're just thinking. So it's a little better, but you can drive yourself fucking crazy with thinking. Constantly changing a negative thought into a positive thought. That can be a lot of fucking work if you're super negative, which almost everyone is. So once you start to move into this third kingdom where this divine presence is, you're relieved because you can stop all of this thinking and figuring out as a way of living. You're always going to be dealing with your mind. So you're always going to have to be aware of your thoughts. You're always going to have to guide your thoughts. All of that is still true. But you're relieved finally that there is someone to consult. Because in the mental realm, it's just you. So I always say, those of you who are familiar with Abraham Hicks, the first thing they say, first of all, if you go to one of their seminars, you see there's no inner anything happening there. They don't have a meditation or a prayer, anything where you're going deep within to find any kind of wisdom about what you want. They just open the seminar by saying, do you know what you want? So they're basically asking the part of your mind that's fucking insatiable what it wants. Right? So then all you've really done, this is what's so funny, I keep laughing, and I love Abraham, I listen to Abraham, they're great for what they're good at. But they open the seminar by saying, are you knowing what you are wanting? And then they spend the whole rest of the seminar saying, stop thinking about that. Right? Because what you do when you open like that and you say, are you knowing what you're wanting? What you're doing is you're saying to people, take some time now to think about what's missing in your life. Right? That's why we start out very differently here. We start out and we say, what are you grateful for? What's going well in your life? What's wonderful about you? We start to activate gratitude and appreciation, which is what Abraham tries to do later on after they've told you, start thinking about what's lacking in your life and how dissatisfied you are with that. Then they try to soothe you. It's a pretty good racket, actually. We're going to create the problem, then we'll solve it for you, instead of just going straight to the solution. But by the time you've been with this for a while, you want to just start living in the solution and just forget about the problem entirely. Stop being focused on the problem altogether. And so ultimately, that's what happens when we start to live our lives from this place of there is this infinite presence which I can consult about not just what I want, but what would be good for me. Because those are not always the same thing. Have you noticed? Remember Terry Cole Whitaker saying years ago, because she'd been married maybe 4 times at that time. And I remember her saying, plenty of people prayed to get me, got me, and wish they hadn't. So you know that sometimes what you want is not what's going to make you ultimately happy. It's not going to necessarily ultimately bring joy to your life. We keep talking about, God bless him, Donald Trump is somebody who's gone through his whole life having every single thing he's ever wanted. And when you look at him, do you see someone where you say, now here is a man who is happy and filled with peace? Or do you see someone who just keeps wanting more and more and more that never really satisfies him? And that's, that childlike mentality. So, in fact, Martha Beck, if you know Martha Beck, talks about in, I can't remember which book. I get them all confused. I think it's in Steering by Starlight, where she actually talks about this process of manifestation and how we manifest. And she talks about how most of people who are using this idea of I can visualize and create what I want are doing it from what she calls the shallows. So it's that shallow, I need this much more money, I need these many more friends, I need this, I need this, I need this, that you're never going deep. And the reason we want to go deep is because there are repercussions. This is why if you look at somebody like, for instance, Donald Trump, who's getting everything he wants, he's never thinking about how this is going to ripple out and affect other people. He doesn't care about that. But when you come from a deeper place, then you care about the repercussions because you realize, as we said last month, we're not just here to shop. We didn't just come to Earth and incarnate to fucking shop. And I don't mean just shop for things. I mean, there's a tendency to shop for a husband, shop for a career, shop for this, that you're always shopping in some. And there has to be fucking more to this. You can't say, oh, I've reincarnated 16 times to shop. Right? There has to be an evolution of our soul. So this is what we started to talk about last month and what we're going more and more deeply into, which is the idea that we all have a purpose and a reason for being here. So we've been talking more also about how the Course really emphasizes this so much. You are absolutely irreplaceable in the mind of God, the Course says. That you have a function and a purpose that's bigger than shopping, that's bigger than getting what you want. It includes having a wonderful life, but the purpose is not getting what you want. There's a larger purpose. There's a larger role for everyone to play. And ultimately, that's what you get to eventually if you live your life where even if you were getting everything that you wanted all the time, there's a certain point where it becomes wildly dissatisfying. Because you just think there has to be more than this. And in fact, if you've watched, how many of you have watched, it's like the best thing ever, have watched the Leah Remini shows on Scientology. It's like the best fucking thing ever because it just shows you how willing we are to buy into something that isn't even good for us if it promises us what it promised her, which is that your life will now have meaning. It's not just that you will get your act together and you'll be smarter and you'll be healthier and you'll have a good career. But one of the things that she has said over and over and over again about even as abusive as it is, because there are lots of, like, you get punished for shit. You know, like, even as a celebrity, she got punished for shit, plus you had to pay for your punishment. So it wasn't even like you just got punished and you had to pay them. Okay? And people be like, how insane are you? You were on a national television show, you were famous. And she said, well, what we were taught and basically brainwashed into was that we were saving the planet and that we were the only ones who were. That only Scientologists were saving the planet. So that whole idea, and if you look even at the world, you can see that all of these cults, whether they're religious or legitimate religion, offshoots, or whatever, promise people the things that ultimately matter most to your deepest self, but it's a spurious promise. One thing is that you have a purpose. Everybody wants some purpose. Everybody also wants to feel like they belong somewhere. So that's what these cults do. They say, well, of course you feel weird in the world and you don't belong, because the Course says everybody feels that way, because you know this isn't home. But what the Course says is that I will be still an instant and go home is you just close your eyes and you go, home. Because home is just a recognition of your oneness with God. It's not a place. That's why no place will feel like home. You won't die and go to a heavenly place that will be home. Home is an internal thing. You can drop your body here and just go to another place that doesn't feel like home, because it's a consciousness. But if you promise people your family here, you belong here, you're one of us here, then people want that, so they'll say, well, I'll investigate it further. And not only that, you're making a huge positive difference. You're important. Well, the Course says that too. But there's nothing to join and nowhere to go. It says just by you admitting that you are the light of the world, you're fulfilling your function. Put your hand on your heart. Say, I am the light of the world. I am the light of the world. I am the light of the world. Okay, that's your function. So what does the light do? It just shines. It just radiates light. So this is why also it's so simple. The answer to everything is, and this is why a course starts out in the introduction. I mean, you could just tear the introduction out and just throw the rest of the book away, basically. This is a lot of talking for a very simple premise. Why? Because the Course says simplicity is very difficult for twisted minds. But the premise of the Course is the same as it is in New Thought, the same as everything that Ernest Holmes taught, which is there's nothing to fight against. There's nothing to battle. That darkness does not need to be fought because darkness isn't an entity. It has no qualities. It's merely the absence of light. So the light does not battle the darkness. It doesn't fight the darkness. It doesn't resist the darkness. It just shines, and the darkness, whoosh, gone. Right? This was last month, our affirmation, which was that all appearances of limitation yield to spiritual truth. All appearances of limitation yield to spiritual truth. So what is the spiritual truth? Love, joy, peace, harmony, kindness, prosperity, abundance, health, wholeness. So that's then all Ernest Holmes did was keep affirming the spiritual truth, and then everything unlike that couldn't stand. It doesn't stand. Just like when we walk into this room, before the lights are on, if it was dark outside and it would be dark in here, we wouldn't say, what will we do? How must we resist this darkness? How long will it take us to get rid of this dark, to fight it, to beat it out of the room? Or you could just flip the switch, it's gone. It just recedes like that. So the Course says that if you are the light of the world, you just shine that light. But you have to remember that you are that all the time. I'm the light. I didn't come here to fix other people. I didn't come here to change other people. I didn't come here to heal a broken world. I just came here to be the light and to give love. That's it, to give. And we don't mean affection. Let me read from this Raymond Charles Barker book that we talk about, Treat Yourself to Life. This is a statement I've used for a number of years. I started using this statement at a time in my life when I was lonesome, and it worked for me. A positive spiritual statement works for you. It sets up a new activity in consciousness which produces a new experience in your life. The statement is this: divine love brings together and maintains together those who belong together, that the glory of God shall be made manifest. So he just used that as his thought. This is my thought in my consciousness now, that divine love is doing the work. It's bringing together all the right people who have that same similar divine love vibration in them. We're brought together and held together by that. When I use the word love in a spiritual sense, I'm not speaking of sentimentality. I like sentimentality, I enjoy it, but when I use the word love, I'm dealing rather with what I feel is the cohesive action of the universe. So that's what we're talking about with love. It's the cohesive action of the universe. That's the love we're talking about. We're not talking about an affectionate love. It can be affectionate. We're talking about sentimentality. It can be sentimental, but sometimes that love is being radiated out into people that we personally dislike. So it's obviously not affectionate. Helen Schuckman, who scribed the Course, and Bill Thetford, who helped her scribe the Course, they despised each other most of the time. And they were together like maybe 15 years putting this material together, not getting along a lot of the time, writing this huge book about love and forgiveness. Makes sense when you think about it. And at one point, Jesus, who is the author of the Course, it was channeled material. You don't have to believe that, doesn't really matter. But Jesus told Helen at one point, he said, you don't even realize how much you and Bill hate each other. He said, what you've done, now I want you to get this because I want you to think about this in terms of how we think about relationships from that shallow place, what the Course in Miracles calls the ego thought system. He said, what you want is to get rid of the other person and keep the hate. Do you get that? There are lots of people who would like to get rid of Donald Trump but keep the hate for him and then call themselves spiritual. Do you see how you're a hypocrite when you do that? That's hypocrisy. I have a resentment and I dislike Donald Trump. I want to get rid of him but keep my opinion about him. Then stop calling yourself spiritual and stop coming to these groups. Start going to Nazi hate groups. Be honest with yourself. If that's how you feel, then that's what you need to work on. Not getting rid of the person, your business partner who stole all your money, your mother who abused you, all these things where we think, I want to get rid of my horrible boss, but keep my resentful opinion of him, but call myself a spiritual student and seeker or practitioner. You're just lying to yourself. Didn't come here for this today, did you? Come on, just tell us we're going to prosper and send us home. But see, even in scriptures it says, if you're coming to the altar to make your gift and you have something against your brother has something against you, go and clear it up first. Right? So that's what this level is about then, is, Lord, create in me a clean heart. Because that's really what I'm here for, not just to get a nicer apartment. I'd like a nicer apartment. But here's the thing. You can take your old resentments into the new apartment. And that's why the idea of healing even. Joel Goldsmith talks so much about how what he teaches is the infinite way. Well, he's passed on, but people still study the infinite way. He talks about how this is not a philosophy that's just about turning poor health into good health, turning poverty into prosperity. So many times, how, when Spirit is after you, right? You've had that, right? After you. Hot on your ass. Right? So everywhere you turn, it's the same fucking message over and over and over again. So it's like, okay. I can't even tell you how many different books, different teachers, different teachers writing in different decades and all this stuff, where I would pick it up over and over again and be that quote from Scripture that says, where Jesus says, "Go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you." So he would say, sometimes when he would heal people, he'd say, "Now go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you." So what does that mean? In Course in Miracles terms, sin just means error and usually a loveless perception. So it's just something, it's not anything that you've done against God. You're not going to be punished for it. It's not evil. Sin is an archery term. It means you missed the mark. So that's all. I mean, you've missed the mark. When you've sinned, you've erred, you've missed the mark, and you need correction. So go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you, means that you can heal somebody over and over and over again, but if they have not had a change in consciousness, then it's just temporary. It's what Marianne Williamson used to call it, temporary relief of minor existential pain. That was based on an old aspirin commercial. So it would be like, you're going to be healed from this for a little while, but it's just going to manifest in some other way. It might be the same thing, or just in some other way. In other words, we cannot treat ourselves out of problems we keep behaving our way into. You understand? You can't pray your way out of problems you keep behaving your way into. So you can't say, well, I want to be healed of this, that, or the other thing, but I'm not going to stop talking about my ex-husband. Well, then get ready for something else. That's why Jesus said, go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. Right? You have to change. It's not enough that this be healed. You are going to have to change in consciousness if you don't want this or something worse back. When we first, me and a lot of other people, were getting into this in the 80s, started with Terry Cole Whitaker, and then I was with Louise Hay and Marianne Williamson. This was in the throes of the AIDS crisis. And one of the things that Marianne used to say, she would say, listen, if you had a cold, then it might be different. Now, this was before there was anything to do about AIDS. There was not AZT, there was nothing. So all people had was these spiritual groups to go to, because doctors had no hope whatsoever. There was no medical hope whatsoever. People were just dying in droves. It was a plague. And so in her lectures, people would ask questions. So they would sit down and ask questions, and maybe they'd be asking questions about, I have this resentment against so-and-so, or this is happening in this area, or whatever. And she would say, if you had a cold, then this would not be such a big deal, maybe. But what you have is a life-threatening illness that there is no medical cure or help for right now, so you cannot afford to fuck around like this. You can't have just a little resentment. You can't have just a little unforgiveness about yourself. You can't afford that. So if you look at your life and you say, I'm not living as gloriously and magnificently as I would like to, then where are you harboring things that are preventing that, thinking you can afford to have this little grievance, this little resentment, this little thing against the government or the president or the economy or the banks that took your house or the medical institution that messed up your records or whatever it is? Go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. It was around that same time when Peter McWilliams wrote that book, You Can't Afford the Luxury of a Negative Thought. So you want to start to think that way. You can't afford the luxury of a resentment, of a hatred, of a guilt complex. You can't afford the luxury of it if you want to live your purpose as the light of the world. I came here to be the light of the world. Everybody did. And you will be used. You just offer to say, Spirit, use me today. Thy will be done. Now, what I love is that A Course in Miracles says over and over and over again, God's will is your perfect happiness. So you have to make sure, and one of the reasons, in fact, there's a line in the Course that says, fear of the will of God is one of the strangest beliefs the human mind has ever made. Because too many of us were brought up to think that God's will would be that everybody would be Mother Teresa. So if I live God's will, I'm going to have to go to fucking India and wear brown and wash the feet of the poor, and I just don't have the temperament for that, frankly. 2 weeks in India and they would be, get him the fuck out of here. He has made things worse. Okay? So you have to understand that A Course in Miracles says it is a highly individualized curriculum. So you will be used according to your own temperament and personality. Not everybody is going to be the same. And that actually, if you are fulfilling your function, you will feel satisfied and happy. And it may not be something that you thought you wanted to do. Like, I tried to quit this job so many times. And I would say, God, you know I'm not suited for this. This is not, what am I doing here? Like, I don't want to hug people. I don't want to talk to them and hear their stories. I don't want to have to not swear. I'm just not suited for this. So you should pick somebody who's more patient and just naturally kind. And we've said it before, that it was very clear the Holy Spirit said, oh, we have lots of people like that, but we only have one you. Okay? Like, here's a very specific taste. Okay? So, and the Course in Miracles says that if you don't fulfill your place in the plan, no one else fills it, and it just waits empty. So if you just go, okay, fine. I'm just going to go and be me, and if people don't like it, there's the fucking door. You know, I've always said, $20 at the door does not make me your bitch. You know, there's no one's here by court order. You know, the right people and situations will be drawn to you. And this is the big relief of this kingdom, because there's a level of trust then that comes of, God, I assume you're in control here. That is one of my favorite Marianne Williamson prayers, is in the very beginning days when she was lecturing to groups like this size, and she had just stopped doing secretarial work and was just living off what she was making from the lectures. And she said one week there was an issue with money. And she said, now this is how we're taught in A Course in Miracles how to do our prayerful alignment, which is a little bit different, which is that we're taught not to pray for specifics. Because what that does is what basically Jesus told Helen was, the more specific your prayer, the more you've limited the power. You understand? But the more general you are, then the more you're open to however it comes. So, and we talked about this last month. I'll just give a quick recap that we are the sons and daughters of God only if we say so. If you don't know you're a son or daughter of God, then you're just a human being stumbling around on the earth plane as most people are. So there are laws that pertain to humans, and then there are laws that pertain to the children of God. And the children of God are not just everybody on the earth. You're only a child of God if you know yourself to be a child of God. Now, doesn't mean you'd use that language necessarily, but you would know that there was something in you that was connected with the infinite and that was heir to that and not heir to the limiting laws of humans. So that's very few people. There are lots of people in spiritual groups who still think of themselves as human beings, which is why they're not heir to the laws of God. They're still heir to genetics and the economy and the political power of the time. You must know that you are, and that's all. You just have to know it. That's it. As soon as you go, oh my God, I'm a son of God, then the universe goes, fuck yeah, thought you'd never get it. So, and this is all Ernest Holmes too. Is like the first beginning steps of treatment, you have to align yourself with God as one with God. That's what then takes you out of the limitations of the earth plane into your divine sonship, right? So you have to know that. So in things like the Course in Miracles, we're taught to be more general about things and not ask for the specific, because then we're just limiting the answers. So Marianne didn't ask for money. She just said, this was her prayer, and I love this prayer, God, I assume you're in control here. That was it. Just, God, I assume you're in control here. Right? There's not enough money this week. I assume you're in control here. So that Saturday, so she was saying that as what? As a daughter of God. Right? As a daughter of God, I'm saying, God, I assume you're in control of my life. I know who I am in God. Joint heir with God. So, therefore, I assume you're in control here. Then she just relaxed. That's what you do. Then you just relax. So, she said the next Saturday, some man came up to her. Now, keep in mind, this is 1980 prices. This has probably been like 1984. So at the time, I think the lectures were like a $5 suggested donation. So some man came up to her at the end and said, I want to give you this check for $1,000 to support you in your work. And she said, oh, no, you don't give me that kind of money. Someday I'll have a nonprofit status, and then you can give me that kind of money. So what had happened? She had known the truth as a daughter of God. When the answer came, Marianne, the limited human creature, stepped back in and said, no. Have we not all done this? Have we not all done this? Where, okay, I know that I'm a child of God, and so I open to da-da-da-da, and then it comes and the human creature says, not so fast. So I'm sure in Marianne's mind, she was probably thinking something like, oh, that's too much money for one person to give. And probably in her mind, she thought, oh, what we'll have is an increase in attendance and a lot more people giving. So she was deciding for someone else what they should give, what was appropriate to them. And she said, I saw the look of disappointment on his face. And I also saw that I had, by stepping in, rejected a brother and realized the saying of that, the truth of that saying, it is as blessed to give as it is to receive. She said, I had not only stopped my blessing, I had stopped his. That's what happens at that level of, I know what I need, I know what's supposed to happen, I know the way it's supposed to happen, I'm going to affirm specifically that happened. But when we move into this realm of grace, and I assume, for years I said, I work for Jesus. I'm a part-time executive, semi-retired secretary to Jesus. But now I've quit. I've married Jesus. I am Mrs. Jesus. I have finally attained what was truly my whole life's goal from the very beginning, which was to be a housewife. This is all I've ever wanted, ever in my whole life from the time I was a child, was to be a housewife. This eluded me till I married Jesus. Now, let me explain why this is better and why you too should marry God, whatever you consider God to be. Because it is not enough to just work for God, as I've taught people to do for years, although it's fabulous, it's the best job in the universe. And working for God is whatever you're doing. It's not because you're a spiritual lecturer. If you're a secretary, you work for God. You know that I don't work for people, corporations, or for money. I work for God. Right? So you've probably heard me say that before. So for years I thought, I'll work for Jesus. Now, I heard this years ago. It took me a long time to really accept this. Now, first of all, I was raised in the Catholic Church. And I went to Catholic school the first 6 years of my life. And the school that I went to, like half of the building was the school, and then the other half was the convent. So we were like in the place that the nuns lived and taught us. And you know probably that all nuns wear wedding rings, signifying they are married to Jesus, they are married to God. And Scripture talks about, the bride of Christ and all of this. I don't know if you know who Joyce Meyer is, but Joyce Meyer is this Christian TV evangelist who is hilarious and kind of crazy. Like, I can only watch just so much of her because then she'll get to the blood of Jesus-y, and I just can't handle it. Too much of that. But there's a lot of fabulous shit that she says. And one of the things that she talked about was, and I heard her say this probably 15 years ago, and never really accepted it for myself, but she talked about the foolishness of dating God. That a lot of us are just kind of dating God. We're just sort of, we get together now and then, we have fun and so on. And she said, this is the shift that you make when you get this. She said, her name is Joyce Meyer, and she married Dave Meyer. So she said, when I was dating Dave, I didn't have anything. She said, Dave had a house, and Dave had a car, and Dave had credit cards. She said, when I was dating him, I didn't have any of that stuff. But the second I married Dave, I had a house, a car, and credit cards too. That's what happens when you marry God. If you work for God, or you're dating God, then you still are just negotiating. But if you say, oh no, I'm married to God, I've married Jesus, I've married Buddha, I've married the Divine Mother, whatever, then you are joint heir in Christ. It's all shared. And this is what the deep spirituality tells us, is that everything that is God is yours. It is all yours. So you start to step into that place of, that's right. How could you possibly have a problem? If your car's breaking down, you just say, Jesus, your car is breaking down. Mrs. Jesus needs a new ride. I assume you're in control here. And then you just relax, right? You just relax and you watch how these things unfold. What I'm really talking about today, I remember years ago Terry Cole Whitaker saying this, and I didn't really understand it at the time, but you know how when a seed of truth is planted in your mind and it just takes maybe 30 years for it to grow, but you never can forget it, like it's just always there, it's just constantly there? She said, prayer is alignment. And I knew it was true when she said it, but I didn't totally understand it. And now I get it. And it is why I now no longer believe there is such a thing as the law of attraction. I think actually that is completely a misunderstanding of things. It's interesting because even Ernest Holmes, who talked about the law of attraction, only talked about it in the very beginning and then never talked about it again. It's only in his very early writings. And then he moved on from that and spoke about almost nothing but prayer treatment. So here's what I used to think. I keep telling this story because the obviousness of it makes me feel like an idiot, and I want to share that with you. I've told this story so many times. When I was growing up in Pennsylvania, back in the 1970s, I had a wall that was an entire bulletin board that I had made with those peel-off cork squares. Those of you who are my age might know about those peel-off cork squares. And you put them on your wall, and you make a big bulletin board. And on that bulletin board, I put mostly, and I subscribed even to a lot of like those teenage magazines and stuff. So I would cut out pictures and things. But I also had album covers. And the album covers I had were of Christopher Cross and Kenny Loggins and Debbie Boone and Olivia Newton-John. There were some other people, but those were the main ones. And I had more probably of their records than anybody else. Now I want you to know that this was in the 1970s. I was living in Pennsylvania. I didn't even know that I would ever leave Pennsylvania. Every single one of those people has come to hear me speak. Some of them have come over and over and over again for years to lectures in Santa Barbara. Some have come to me for counseling. And lots of other people too. But those specifically were the ones that for years I thought, oh, that's the law of attraction. I attracted them because I focused on them and I attracted them. What I now know, as we talked about this a little bit last month, is those were simply people on my list. Helen and Bill, who were scribing A Course in Miracles, were told by Jesus that relationships are assignments. And the imagery that Helen had, because Helen was supposedly an atheist. She was not an atheist. She was not even an agnostic because she prayed all the time. Now, what kind of an atheist is praying all the time? It's not even that she was praying all the time. She went to Catholic Mass and studied Christian Science. Now, what kind of an atheist has that kind of time and energy? She basically just said that because she was mad at God. So she had a lot of imagery that was Christian Science and Catholic and all of this kind of stuff, even though she was actually a non-practicing Jew. So one of the images that she had was that Jesus talked to her about people who were on her list. And what she referred to it as was the chalice list. Because what the chalice represented to her with all this Catholic imagery was the cup that Jesus drank out of at the Last Supper, which symbolized the atonement. A Course in Miracles uses the word atonement all the time, but it defines it as the undoing. So the atonement is the undoing. That's why A Course in Miracles says miracles don't do anything, they undo. So what is it that needs undoing? Our thinking. Most of it. Most of our thinking. So our story about how we're not enough, other people are not enough, we're limited, life isn't fair, there are things to be afraid of, all this needs to be undone. And the word that A Course in Miracles uses, which I think is probably not the best word, but it's the best one that they sort of came up with, is forgiveness. So the atonement, the undoing, is just the forgiveness, but I would say that is the letting go, the undoing. So of our resentments and our fears and our guilt and our shame and our blame and all of these things, that the Spirit within us wants to undo that, wants to take all of that away from us. Take away our guilt, take away our pain, take away our fear. The way we do that in A Course in Miracles is we meet each other. It's not a solitary journey. The Course in Miracles says that it is a course that's required, but not this book, just what's in it. So it says all of these thousands and thousands and thousands of paths are different aspects of the same course, which are just taking a different route to the same place. It says the difference between the course and others is the course is faster because most other spiritual paths, you can do it in a solitary way. You understand? Like it's just basically you and God, and so you can do your meditation and your prayer and your spiritual practice and all of this stuff, and you can even get yourself to think that you're doing pretty fucking good. I'm really rocking this shit. All right? So you can like fool yourself into thinking, I'm really getting pretty fucking enlightened and clear. Right? So A Course in Miracles says, we just bust that by introducing you to somebody who walks right up to you and pushes your fucking button. Like, I know a lot of people who think they're real fucking spiritual, and they have lives that are pretty solitary a lot of times, and then I've gotten in the car with them. And they don't pay any attention to how unfucking spiritual they are in the car. They've got a lot of rules. I was at a wedding the other weekend. I was sitting at this table with a lot of people that I didn't really know, and there were people from out of state. This was in West Hollywood. And people started talking about their rules for other drivers. Like, don't get in this lane if you're going to be like this. And don't do this if you're going to be like that. And don't go here like you want to. And these people are like, think they're real fucking spiritual people. And they are very spiritual as long as everyone does exactly what they fucking want them to do. Do you understand? Like, I'm real fucking spiritual as long as everybody is doing what is living by Jacob's rules for salvation. Okay? So what A Course in Miracles does is it says, you'll move faster on this path if you're willing, because all relationships are assignments in which in the psychotherapy booklet to the Course, it says the purpose of psychotherapy, and we're all like in a group kind of therapy, is that the sons and daughters of God meet in order to give and receive the blessings and peace of God. That's it. That's all there is. Very, very simple. But then watch how you don't feel like it. I don't want to. I don't like him. But he keeps showing up. I know. A lot of times he's in a new body, but there he is. You know what was on last night was this documentary on HBO called Becoming Cary Grant. Now, it was so interesting because those of you who know anything about, his name was Archibald Leach. He was born as Archibald Leach. When he was very young, maybe like 11 or something like that, he came home from school one day and his mother was gone. And his father just said something like she went off to a spa, and then she never fucking came back from this spa. She just abandoned them. So then he grew up and joined the circus, actually, and was like an acrobat, eventually got into acting. They changed his name to Cary Grant because he looked a certain way. But he was nothing like that character. That's why this movie is called Becoming Cary Grant. And it was based on his unpublished autobiography where he talked about becoming this person and how even late in his life, some reporter said to him, everybody would like to be Cary Grant. And he said, yeah, me too. Because he knew that was not who he really was. But he had somehow managed to inhabit that and felt like a phony. Well, what he did was, he then, of course, didn't know until he was like 30 years old that what had actually happened was his father had had his mother institutionalized for mental illness because she was hearing voices. She thought there were people living in the walls who were coming out and poisoning her food and all of this stuff. And so he just had her institutionalized and then gave no explanation, and Cary Grant didn't find out until he was like 30. But he had already now developed this pattern where he believed, of course, that women couldn't be trusted and would just leave. So he just kept fucking getting married and fucking up every relationship that he was in. That's why what healed him was LSD. Right? He started, because that's when LSD was being used therapeutically, and he went into therapy, and you would go in and they would give you LSD with the therapist, and you'd be there for like 5 or 6 hours processing all these well, that's where he found out how he had basically just kept reenacting this pattern over and over again. So A Course in Miracles says, these people are on your list. So everybody who's coming up to you is basically, every relationship is a kind of assignment where you can either choose to, here we have this Catholic imagery again, hand them the chalice of atonement, which says, I release you from guilt. I release you from me judging you or attacking you in my mind or resenting you or feeling sad. I'm giving you the chalice and releasing you. Or, he said, you can press the crown of thorns deeper into his head. So, I want you to really have that imagery. The next time someone who you kind of, somebody at work that you just can't get along with, am I going to offer them the mental? Because this is something you're doing internally. It's not in the words you say to them. It's, am I going to offer them the chalice of atonement even though they don't fucking deserve it? See, it's not about them deserving it, because neither do you. Right? It's about a willingness. Now, the course gives us little tools. People ask me about this. There's all these little, so I'm going to give you, I'll even tell you page numbers. Don't come and ask me later. It means you're a horrible student because you're not taking notes. So, in fact, there was a woman, this is great. There was a woman in class on Monday night who was talking about, we were talking about this very thing, where 2 instances came up in her life very quickly, one right after another, where, listen, this is the great news about being as old as we are in this room. You're not going to get any new issues. You have them all. All the ones that you have, they're yours. You won't get any new ones. So you don't have to worry about that. Let's just learn the ones we have. That's why at the beginning of the course it says, free will does not mean that you can determine the curriculum. It only means you can determine what you want to take at a given time. So what most of us tend to do is we start the class and then we drop it because I don't like this teacher, right? That's what Cary Grant did with all these women. He would marry them and go, I don't like the teacher anymore. I'm going to drop this class and take it next semester. Then he'd marry, and you go right through. You just start right where you were. You understand? Until you say, I'm just going to get this. I'm going to offer the atonement and receive the atonement. Until you do that, you just drop the class and start it with somebody else again, right? So, now it doesn't mean you have to stay. If somebody's hitting you in the head, get the fuck out. Okay? Then offer the atonement to them from a different area code. Okay? It's not about staying physically present. If you have an abusive boss, get the fuck out and offer the atonement from the next job. But just know you're not getting away from anything. You're taking it with you until you drop it internally. Okay? So this woman was telling me this story on Monday night in class. She was saying that these 2 instances turned up where one was, she said, this guy, now first of all, she has a little bit of a money issue. So a little bit about just a little scarcity money issue. So she thought maybe it was about that. So she said, this guy that I know, he's an actor, and I've lent him money before, and he asked me to lend him money. And so I did because it was for this specific project that he was going to do that was going to take him like to the next level of his career, and I really felt like that would be helpful to him and so on and so forth. So I lent him the money, and then I found out later he had used it to buy this really expensive soap. So maybe you've had an experience like that, where you've helped somebody in a certain way, and it turned out that really you weren't helping, okay? So she felt then like, well, you know, I can't afford to be lending out money like this, and I did it for a specific reason, and now he's used it to buy soap. So then she said, the next day after that, she said, this friend of mine, it was her 50th birthday, and so I wanted to take her out to her favorite fancy, expensive restaurant for her 50th birthday, and I've been friends with her forever. And her daughter, who is grown, found out, who's like in her 20s or whatever, found out about it or was talking to me on the phone or something, and she wanted to come too. And I said, well, no, because I'm paying, and I can't afford to pay for everybody, and so this is just going to be me and her, so I'm sorry, but it's just us, blah, blah, blah. So fine. So she goes, she meets at the restaurant, and she's there with her friend, and the daughter walks in and sits down, and she has to pay for the fucking daughter. So again, it's like my money, my scarcity, my this, my that. So I said, well, okay, yes, I could see where this would clue into to a money issue and so on and so forth. But it seems more to me that this has more to do with one of the 2 things. This is one of, I think, there's lots more, but 2 of the most powerful sort of ego, because we've talked before about this idea of the limited human creature that we call I is a fictional character. It's something that's made up. Certainly that whole Cary Grant story is proof of that. So this human being is a fictional character. That's why all this work we do on self-esteem is so bogus, because it's trying to build up the esteem of a fictional character. I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Like the Stuart Smalley thing is just so pathetic because you never stop. And in fact, that whole insecurity of I have low self-esteem is actually narcissism. Because it means you're obsessed with yourself. You shouldn't be thinking about yourself that much. You should be thinking about who the fuck's in front of you. Not how you don't have enough courage or self-esteem. You'd be thinking about them. You're just self-obsessed. So, when you are identifying yourself as this small, limited self, then you're defending it all the time. So, two of the most powerful, threatening things that are ego thoughts that come up around this is the thought that someone has betrayed me or someone is taking advantage of me. Anyone? Right? So I said, to me, this sounds more like your fear that people are taking advantage of you than it does the money issue. I think the money issue is just a side thing, but in both these experiences, it's like your ego is saying, they're taking advantage of me. Like, my generosity, and they lied, and they da-da-da-da-da. So then the question about, well, but what do I do now? What do I do? Because now it's over, so now I just carry this around as a resentment about these people now. We're here to be free of all that stuff because all of that stuff is what blocks us from our own health and prosperity and joy and living our dreams and fulfilling our function as the light of the world. So, this is the great thing about the Course is it doesn't just say, you should really get over that. It gives us all these different ways to do that. And what I love about the Course is it says miracles are retroactive. So it doesn't even matter that it's over. So this is a page 90 in the text. So when situations like this come up, you go, I need to do a page 90. That means that something has already happened. So you already fucked up somewhere. So now, what does it mean you fucked up in these spiritual terms? It means you didn't come from love. That's all it means. It means you didn't come from love. First of all, let's also remember that A Course in Miracles says, when the Holy Spirit solves a problem, it's one in which everyone wins and no one loses. So you're not choosing between me or you. So it's not like, well, I'm going to be generous to you at my expense. Because then that's fucked up spiritual thinking that people get is, I'll be generous at my expense. Then that's not loving to you. That's loveless to you. So that's not a real answer. So, like, there are lots of ways it could have went, But the goal of the Course is what? The attainment of inner peace. So you want peace around these things. You don't want to be right. You don't want to be, well, I did stand up for myself and my boundaries and my blah, blah, blah. You want to have the peace of God. Lots of times you have your boundaries and no fucking peace. But I told them. You want the peace of God. So, you with me? Whenever you are not wholly joyous, it is because you have reacted with a lack of love to one of God's creations. That means yourself or another. When you are not wholly joyous, you have reacted with a lack of love to one of God's creations. So, the guy told you he was going to use the money for one thing. He used it for something else. Your response was not the loving, I'm so glad I was able to get him some soap. Because if really we believe this stuff, and again, I have to keep asking us, do we really believe this shit? If we really believe this shit, then we just go, I'm a daughter of God, and money just keeps coming from source all the time, so what the fuck do I care? That's why neither a borrower nor a lender be. It's the understanding that I have infinite resources because I'm a daughter of God. So whatever he did with it, that's what he did with it. I have infinite resources. God, I assume you're in control here. Right? But if I go, my money, right? What I said to her was, she was in that place like Gollum, my precious. My precious soap, my precious soap. Right? That thing that you're protecting. My money. I gave him my money. I gave him my money. Right? No daughter of God is responding that way. Okay, so you realize, because she was upset about it. She was talking about it Monday night in class, which means she was upset about it. So we want a spiritual solution, which is what? I don't like this feeling. I want to feel what? The peace of God. Now the human mind goes, I want my money back and an apology. Well, too bad for you, motherfucker. That's not how shit works. First you get to peace, then you might get the money and the apology. So you just realize, I'm not wholly joyous here, so somewhere I've reacted with a lack of love. Perceiving this as sin, you become defensive because you expect attack. So, in other words, in the human standpoint, you might then start to play it out in your mind. And of course, you're going to play it out horribly, right? Which is, I'm going to call him and say, I found out that the money that you said you were going to spend on that, you spent on soap. And then, of course, you're going to have him say, well, it's too late now, isn't it? Like, you're never going to have him go, oh, dear, I'm so sorry. Like, you start to imagine a fight. You start to imagine how we can't be friends anymore. After this, I can't trust you anymore. No, it's fine. I know I can't trust you. You don't have no integrity. That's all right. I get it. I've done a lot of psychology and work on myself. I understand a lack of integrity. I can't expect you to be any more evolved than you are. That's what the Course calls forgiveness to destroy. All right? So you become defensive because you expect attack. The decision to react this way is yours and therefore can be undone. It cannot be undone by repentance in the usual sense because this implies guilt. If you allow yourself to feel guilty, you will reinforce the effort rather than allow it to be undone for you. Decision cannot be difficult. This is obvious if you realize that you must have already decided not to be wholly joyous if that is how you feel. Therefore, the first step in the undoing, so again, the atonement. The first step in the atonement, which is the undoing, is to recognize that you actively decided wrongly. So what that means is, and this is a big Course concept, and there's probably never been a time in the last decade or so where this is more true than right now, is we must not justify our attack thoughts. You understand? So it doesn't matter that we're perfectly right and they're wrong. That's a justification. I want to keep this attack thought. I want to get rid of Donald Trump and keep my hate. I want to get rid of my ex-husband and keep the resentment. Because I'm justifying my attack thought because after all, they started it. That's always it. I was loving. I was willing to come from love. They started it. That's the justification of I've decided to keep my lovelessness and not have the peace of God and be miserable, but righteous. How dare you? I will never forgive you. Okay. You can actively decide otherwise. So you've decided wrong, but you can actively decide otherwise. Be very firm with yourself in this and keep yourself fully aware that the undoing process, which does not come from you, is nevertheless within you because God placed it there. Your part is merely to return your thinking to the point at which the error was made and give it over to the atonement in peace. Say this to yourself as sincerely as you can, remembering that the Holy Spirit will respond fully to your slightest invitation. And then this is the page 90 prayer that you do. And you're basically saying this to that person. So this would be her, not saying it out loud, but in her mind, saying this to the person, the daughter that showed up at the lunch when she wasn't supposed to, the person who bought the soap. I must have decided wrongly because that's the next prayer. I must have decided wrongly because I'm not at peace. I made the decision myself, but I can also decide otherwise. I want to decide otherwise because I want to be at peace. I do not feel guilty because the Holy Spirit will undo all the consequences of my wrong decision if I will let him. I choose to let him by allowing him to decide for God for me. That's just a longer version of Marianne saying, I assume you're in control here. So you're saying, I decided wrongly by judging my brother, by not offering him the atonement, and so I'm giving this now to the Holy Spirit to undo all the effects of that now. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should call or not call. I don't know if I should send a text or not send a text. I don't know what would make things worse or what would make things better, but what I want is a retroactive miracle, so I'm surrendering all my thoughts about this. That means I'm shredding the evidence. I'm not going to talk about it with my friends. We're not get together and say, you know how he is. Especially if it's a family member. It's so easy for the family to get together about, he's a problem. Right? No, we're shredding the evidence, we're giving. So then there's another prayer. Now this is the one where you're actually saying this mentally to the person. I give you to the Holy Spirit as part of myself. I know that you will be released unless I want to use you to imprison myself. In the name of my freedom, I choose your release because I recognize that we will be released together. That's on page 329 of the text. So that's what I call releasing the hostages. You say, because the Course in Miracles says jailers are in jail too. That sucks. Jailers are in jail too. So just because you're sitting outside the cell with the keys, you're still in a jail watching the prisoner. So you're saying, I want us to be released together. The only way, I offer you the Holy Spirit as part of myself. So we can look at Cary Grant and say, all of those women were just projections of himself. His unhealed issues with his abandoning mother just made him reenact that over and over again. If at any point he would have said to any one of them, I offer you to the Holy Spirit, or whatever words you use, as part of myself. I'm not even seeing you. He wasn't even seeing any of those women. All he saw was the story of a mother that he thought left him. You know how often we don't even see the person in front of us? We just see our story. We've just projected our story onto somebody. So after he got this lesson, then he finally had a happy marriage. Because he set himself free, and that allowed him then to see the woman in front of him instead of the story he'd projected in front of him. Right? So the Course gives us all these little tools, all the way of saying things like that. So you can go through the book and always find these various ways where he'll just give us little tools of like, why don't you say this? Why don't you say that? Why don't you say this? Why don't you say that? There's, let me see if I can find this other place I marked. I think I marked the wrong page. One of them is, I'm not sure where it is, but one of them is when something happens and you don't have any idea what to think at all. There's this prayer that says, I don't know what anything, including this, means. Therefore, I do not know how to respond to it, and I will not use my own past learning as the light to guide me now. Because the problem is when something happens, we think we know what it means. We have a story about it. People always take advantage of me like that. Oh, of course they betrayed me. That's what's always happened. That's what. Instead of saying, I don't know what this means. I have no idea what this means. In my mind, I might take it right to limitation of, oh my God, we're fucked. But if you just go, I don't know what it means, I don't want to go into hell. Your husband comes home and says, I'm leaving you for your sister. And you go, I don't know what that means. No idea what that means. To me, it means my sister's a bitch like she's always been, and you're an asshole like I always suspected. But that feels like pressing the crown of thorns into your head, and that doesn't really make me happy. It makes me satisfied, but it doesn't give me the peace of God. Therefore, let me help you pack. Because obviously, because I'm a daughter of God, there's someone more suitable on the way. I would like to make room in the closet for him. Right? Because I would rather be happy and have the peace of God than hold on to this thing which I think is my salvation. Right? So, okay. So to get back to this whole thing of, we're talking about this idea that people are on your list and you don't know why they're there. This is wonderful. This is innocence. Because you're not starting to assign a role to them. Don't we do this with people? Like this, the innocence of children is that if you're out in the yard playing and you're 6 years old and somebody new comes into the neighborhood and plays and you have a great time and you play catch or you play with dolls or you do this or you do that, at the end of the day, you don't say, "This was really great. I'd like to know where you see this going." Because I don't really want to waste a lot of time if you're seeing other children. So I'm going to need some kind of commitment. What kind of friend are you going to be? You be an everyday friend or once a week friend? Or I need to know what this is going to be about because I have needs and I have to fulfill my needs. I know what's good for me, right? But then as we get older, we start to do that. It fucks up our relationships because we try to assign people a slot. This is where you belong. This is how you're going to be. This is the frequency of our interaction. This is what I expect for you. You're my partner. I hate that word. You're my partner. Like, because as soon as you say that, as soon as you say even husband, wife, or partner, you project onto it what you think that means. Here's what a partner does. Here's what a wife does. Then when they don't fulfill that, you're pissed. Why isn't he paying half the bills? I'm the one who's supposed to be staying home. Why am I the breadwinner? This is not the way it's supposed to be. Right? Or whatever. We just get into that. We're playing. But if you realize you don't know why anyone's there, so therefore you don't know how long they're supposed to stay. So what I realized was, see, your soul already has a bigger picture for you when you come here. It knows all of this stuff. So what I realize now is I didn't attract those people into my life. My soul knew they were on my list. That's why I didn't meet them. They met me. You understand the difference? Fanny Flagg, who wrote Fried Green Tomatoes, who also came to the lectures for years in Santa Barbara, and she said to me one time, because I would say about how exhausting sometimes it was, because in those days, at the end of the lecture, it'd be like a wedding line. Like people would line up, and they'd all want to hug and say something to me, and da-da-da-da, and I'd be so exhausted afterwards. And then by the time I wasn't living there anymore, it was like I'd have to do this whole wedding line and then drive 100 miles home and do all this stuff. And Fanny said to me, because she'd been famous for a very long time, and people, people love Fanny. It's so wild. Of all the celebrities, and people wanted to meet Fanny more than they wanted to meet Oprah. You understand? It's just the way it is. And she said to me one day, she said, "You don't understand, Jacob. They don't want to meet you. They want you to meet them." You see the difference? Jacob, they don't want to meet you. They want you to meet them. When they come up to you, they don't care about you. They want to tell you who they are. And all about, they want you to meet them, and then they want you to make them feel special, and that's why it's fucking exhausting. They want you to meet them. So I realized with these famous people, I wasn't meeting them, they were meeting me because they had come to me for help. So if I started thinking, we're going to be friends, or we'll go to coffee, or da-da-da-da-da, now I've projected onto it something. Instead of, maybe they're going to be here one lecture and I'll never see them again. Maybe they'll sit in the back. Maybe Elvis will come and sit in the back and won't even say hello. We'll leave. So you start to realize this about everybody then, all across the board, that just because you have a fabulous, amazing date with somebody and you have amazing chemistry, that may be all they came for. That was it, that their soul came, they were on the list, for you to just have that experience of giving and receiving the peace and joy of God, and now they're gone. So you don't go, what went wrong? No, that's what went right. What went wrong was your story of, it should have lasted until we died in each other's arms. When, I don't seriously know what's wrong with me. But I've managed to turn it into a living. So one of those things in Santa Barbara, when there was a lot going on, when I was lecturing there a lot, was Jane Seymour was friends with this woman that I knew in Santa Barbara, this very wealthy woman, her husband. And this was like in 1991 or something like that. And so Jane Seymour's going to be husband, I think James Keach, was like a fan of Mary Ann's. So this woman called me and said, he wants Mary Ann to do his wedding ceremony. And we don't know anybody. We've tried to get through to Mary Ann, and she doesn't return any of our calls and stuff like that. And so can you see what you can do? So I managed to get it all hooked up and everything so that Mary Ann met with them and all this stuff, and she ended up doing the wedding. Now, these friends were hosting the wedding at their home because they had this estate, and they had their guest house was like as big as probably your house. In their guest house, they had all this stuff that most people rent. I found this out at the wedding. They had like these huge banquet tables and crystal chandeliers and beaded tablecloths and all this stuff. They just happened to have it. So in this huge tent, and so they hosted the wedding there. And it was an afternoon tea, and then the wedding, and it was overlooking the ocean on their estate and all this stuff. And I hadn't seen Mary Ann in a couple of years, actually, but I ended up getting her, hooking them up. But then that got me in on a pass, okay? So I was at the wedding in on a pass. Like Jane Seymour and her husband didn't know who the fuck this dude was. And it was black tie. So I'm at this afternoon, driving up to this estate behind gates in my tin can Toyota. Okay, so it was so surreal. All this stuff was so surreal. And there's like all this security and helicopters because the Enquirer's trying to take pictures of it, and all these people on her, send them around. Everybody's being sent around. Lisa Gibbons is being sent around, and all these people are being sent around. And they see me and they're like, Jacob, come into the house. So I get to go in with my date, and Mary Ann, and I had told them with Mary Ann, I had said, I shouldn't be telling any of this. They're divorced now, who cares? And Mary Ann I hadn't seen Mary Ann in years anyhow, and they had a hard time getting her, and I was like, well, here's what you do, here's what you offer. When you call down, tell them this. Because they wanted her to come up from LA to Santa Barbara, I said, tell them you'll send down the Bentley to pick her up. She'll come. So they sent the Bentley. I said, put like a bottle of Cristal. Tell her she can have, she and her daughter Emma can have a suite in the west wing of the house and all this stuff. So she comes and she's like, so I walk in the house and Mary Ann's at the top of the staircase coming in. And I just remember her coming in and looking at me and going, she wasn't even down the stairs, and she goes, how do you know these people? It's like, you told me we work for God, okay? So this is all just gossip backstory for what I want to tell you about the ceremony. So they had written their own, and nobody does a wedding like Mary Ann. She's amazing. If you buy the book Illuminata, it has her wedding ceremony in it, which is very fucking long, which she does totally from memory. So just completely, she has no notes, she has nothing in her hand, and she remembers every fucking thing. So she'll stand there and say, your cousin Abigail and your sister Gertrude and your da-da-da, and she just fucking remembers that shit. So if you can get her to do your wedding, send the Bentley. It's amazing. So, but they had written their own vows, so there were parts where they got to give their vows to each other. I don't remember which of them it was, but one of them said, and die in your arms. And I remember Mary Ann stopping and saying, I would hope that you would live in each other's arms. And so it was just that little twist of how we get these romanticized visions about everything, how our work life is going to be, what our friendships are going to be like, the relationships that we're going to have with our children, all of these romanticized visions that have nothing to do necessarily with what the relationship is about at the soul level. And that's the only level that you really want to satisfy anyhow, is the soul level of relationship. Because the personality level of relationship is eventually going to start gathering evidence. But if you're there for a deeper soul reason, then you can keep letting go of the personality evidence because you know, oh, this is part of the assignment here of the giving and receiving love, and it will last as long as it's supposed to last, where we are at maximal learning potential with each other. And the Course says that sometimes that lasts an entire lifetime, but sometimes it doesn't, in which it says they will appear to separate. But it says those who meet will meet again, meaning that this one limited lifespan is not it. The people that you meet in this life, you've probably met in many other lives. And the idea of, let's do it good this time. Let's not leave here this time with any resentments towards each other or any regrets. It doesn't mean we approve of each other's behavior. It just means that we've decided not to press the crown of thorns, but instead to offer the undoing. And these are a couple of the fabulous prayers that the Course uses for that, of just saying, I don't know what to do with you. I'm going to offer you the Holy Spirit to undo all of the loveless thoughts that I have about this, and to undo all of your loveless thoughts if that's what you want to. Because I want to be free. I want to be happy. I want to be open to life today and not be dragging around the dead past. In fact, A Course in Miracles says that to truly forgive and undo is to forget the past. That you're not anymore thinking about, you bought that soap. That you decide for your own peace of mind. You know, that you decide that you're going to stop thinking about, you took all of our money and da-da-da-da. You know, if you've seen, what's her name? Who wrote When Food is Love? You know, she writes about overeating. We can't think of her name. Well, anyhow, she was one of the people. So she writes all these books about, she wrote that book, I think, God and Food. But anyhow, she's one of the people that Bernie Madoff stole all her money. So after she'd made all this money from all these best-selling books and stuff, then Bernie Madoff stole all her money, her and her husband's money. And so she was like, that was what we like to call where the rubber meets the road of your spirituality. And so she had like a couple of bad days before she got back to that place where it was like, oh, really, I'm okay. Like it's just in a story that I'm not okay. So that by the time she had worked through all of that, she says now it's the best thing that ever happened to her. Now that's a spiritual Olympian to say, best thing that ever happened was Bernie Madoff stole my whole life savings, what I worked for my whole life, me and my husband took every dime we had. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because that really gave her then that rubber meets the road of, it's not just a theory. It's no longer just theoretical, oh yeah, God is my source, because I got a lot of money. It's like, no, all your money's gone, now who's your source? And then you just, God's still my source. I think maybe it's in this book or the other Raymond Charles Barker book that we talked about, The Science of Spiritual Living or something like that, where he talks about if you really understand this stuff, then when you lose your job or your money's all gone, you just go, I'll just make some more. You don't go, like you go, well, just make some more. Like I know how to bring in money because I brought all of that money in. So obviously I'm just going to keep doing that. It's not that the spiritual way is not about, I have that, maybe I even have it in here somewhere. In my many notes. It's the Joel Goldsmith thing that has to do with, it's not about accruing, oh no, it's up here. These are all my notes I carry around that are my paper Prozac, I call it. I highly recommend it. I sit down every morning at Starbucks with this. Here it is. The person following the spiritual way of life thinks of drawing his good from that which is doesn't think of drawing his good from that which is already manifested out here. In other words, he does not live or depend on yesterday's manna. He lives as if God were flowing forth 24 hours a day forever. Whether you are thinking in terms of potatoes, dollar bills, friends, service, devotion, good, or healing, it is not what is already in the manifest world that you're seeking, but the continuous flow from the Father within, the multiplications of loaves and fishes from within. So it's, if you know you're connected to God, you know that you're connected to the infinite source from which everything flows. So you're not thinking, yeah, but I'm too old now to make more money. You go, God, I assume you're in control here. It's not like the Holy Spirit goes, well, we'd like to prosper you, but you're 70. Obviously, you can see our hands are tied. Your prime earning years are behind you. You're kind of fucked. We'll try to send some crusts of bread, but if your 401k's gone, what are you going to do in this market? Right? No, if you're connected to an infinite source, then you're just like, you don't think, I better start saving up oxygen. Because I'm going to want to have enough to breathe the whole rest of my life. And I don't know how long I'm going to live. So I better make sure I'm going to have enough oxygen to last the whole rest of my life. You don't think, like, I'm going to have to start getting enough meals to last me the rest of my life. I want to have, in a room somewhere, enough meals for the next maybe 30 years I'm going to be living. Right? The only thing we do that with really is money. I'm going to need enough money to last forever. You don't think I'm going to need to save up enough heartbeats, enough breaths in, enough food to eat. It's just that idea that money is scarce and finite, and there's only a certain amount of time that you're going to be able to bring it in. We've talked about this here so many times before, that money it's not even a form anymore, it's electronic. It's floating through the air. We could just be going. Ventura Papke, who was a practitioner with Ernest Holmes, would do that. She would go out into her yard and pretend her tree was a money tree. And she had a big galvanized bucket, those galvanized. She would take this, and she was only about this tall, and she was like, and then she'd take the bucket, and she'd take it and dump it in her bathtub. And then she'd go back out again and get another one. What was she doing? Losing her mind. No, what was she doing? She was impressing on her subconscious mind the idea of limitless money. Because from the time you're very small, you're told, money doesn't grow on trees. So she's undoing that thought. Oh, maybe not for you, motherfucker. I got a money tree in my front yard. So what did her husband do? Build a fence around the yard so the neighbors couldn't see. Vetura's out on the visible money tree again. We need a fence. Somebody's going to come get Vetura. But Vetura prospered because she kept impressing on her subconscious mind this idea of infinite good, infinite resources. Right? I'm connected to the infinite flow. I'm almost ready to start the class. Okay, so what I realized then, I swear this is kind of winding it down now, is so many of the things that we were taught about the law of attraction and bringing it in is really the law of alignment. It's the principle of alignment, that we're not really attracting anything, we're aligning with things. In other words, ABC has a whole night, I don't remember what night it is, maybe it's Thursday, it's Wednesday or Thursday. It's all these comedies that I love. So it's Blackish and Modern Family and all these things. And so I watch them because I like to feel good, and they're feel-good shows. Now, I am simply aligning with the station where that's broadcast. I'm not attracting those TV shows. I don't say, you know what? I'm going to affirm that I'm worthy and deserving of Modern Family. I feel there's not enough Modern Family in my life. I know that I deserve it. I'm going to affirm it. I'm going to visualize it. I'm going to cut out pictures of it and put it on my vision board. And that's why you realize it doesn't matter whether you're a good person or the most evil serial killer who ever lived. You can turn on ABC and watch Modern Family because you just align with it. You haven't attracted it into your experience. You've just aligned with it. And when you align with it, there's nothing else going on that channel at that time. So whatever you're in alignment with, there's nothing else going on that vibratory band, right? So that's all we're ever really doing when we say that prayer is alignment, treatment is alignment. It means, and this also is why Jesus said you should ask as if you'd already received it. So this is in this little booklet, The Song of Prayer, from A Course in Miracles, under the section True Prayer. Prayer is a way offered by the Holy Spirit to reach God. It is not merely a question or an entreaty. It cannot succeed until you realize that it asks for nothing. How else could it serve its purpose? It is impossible to pray for idols and hope to reach God. True prayer must avoid the pitfall of asking to entreat. Ask rather to receive what is already given, to accept what is already there. That's all Ernest Holmes said treatment was. That he's the one that said, behind every physical organ, there is a divine pattern of the perfect organ. You are just aligning with that. You're not creating it. You're not attracting it. You are aligning to the divine pattern. It's already there. That's the whole Neville premise, is being in the space of the good. You're just lining up with it. Here's what I want you to do. This is our meditation. You don't have to close your eyes. We'll do that in a minute. But our meditation is for you to imagine just for a moment that it is the end of this summer. So it's the second Saturday in September. It's September the 9th. And you're maybe here with me, and your whole attitude is, that was the best summer of my life. That was so wonderful. It just unfolded in such wonderful ways. Everything just seemed to be at the right time, at the right place, for the most fun, for the most prosperity, for the most joy, for the greatest peace, for the greatest unfoldment, for all these unexpected things that I wouldn't have even known to think about. That's living in the state of as if it's already done, as if it's already finished. That's what we mean when we say true prayer is alignment with what's already been given. That's the whole basis that Mary Baker Eddy starts out her Christian Science with, is that God's already done everything that God's going to do. You just have to line up with it. That's why Paul said, you must work out your own salvation. The formula's been given. You have to work out the formula. Mary Baker Eddy said, who stands in front of a blackboard and prays that math will solve the problem? Right? Math is the formula that's been given. You must work out the math. So there is no part for God to do except to guide. That's why we're never asking God to do something. We're always asking God to heal our mind. When we say in a situation, God, I assume you're in control here, we're not saying control the events. We're saying control my thinking. Heal my mind from the limited, sacrificial, fearful, resentful, button-pushed being to the son or daughter of God. Heal my mind. This is every day my prayers. Heal my mind. If my mind is healed, the effects will show that. But if I'm just wanting the effects to change, then the chances that I'm going to go and sin no more are pretty low. Because if I haven't changed my consciousness, then what I did that was basically making this manifest will just make it manifest in a different way. Right? I want to be wiser than that. I want to have greater understanding than that. So the secret of prayer is to forget the things you think you need To ask for the specific is much the same as to look on sin and then forgive it. Also, in the same way, in prayer, you overlook your specific needs as you see them, and you let them go into God's hands. There they become your gifts to him, for they tell him that you would have no gods before him, no love but his. What could his answer be but your remembrance of him? Can this be traded for a bit of trifling advice about a problem of an instant's duration? God answers for eternity, but still all little answers are contained within this. Prayer is a stepping aside, a letting go, a quiet time of listening and loving. It should not be confused with supplication of any kind because it is a way of remembering your holiness. Prayer is an offering, a giving up of yourself to be at one with love. There is nothing to ask because there is nothing left to want. That nothingness becomes the altar of God. It disappears in him. This is not a level of prayer that everyone can yet attain. Those who have not yet reached it still need your help in prayer because their asking is not yet based on acceptance. Help in prayer does not mean that another mediates between you and God, but it does mean that another stands beside you and helps to raise you up to God. One who has realized the goodness of God prays without fear, and one who prays without fear cannot but reach him. He can therefore also reach his Son, wherever he may be and whatever form he may seem to take. Praying to Christ in anyone is true prayer because it is a gift of thanks to his Father. To ask that Christ be but himself is not entreaty. It is a song of thanksgiving for what you are. Herein lies the power of prayer. It asks for nothing and receives everything. This prayer can be shared because it receives for everyone. To pray with one who knows that this is true is to be answered. Perhaps the specific form of resolution for a specific problem will occur to either one of you. It does not matter which. Perhaps it will reach both if you are genuinely attuned to each other. It will come because you have realized that Christ is in both of you. That is its only truth. So when he says here, praying to Christ in anyone is true prayer, that is how we pray for another person. We pray for another person by speaking right to them. We are not speaking to God. We are speaking to the Christ in them. When Helen was taught to pray for people, she would speak from her mind to their mind. And what she would say was some form, basically, of, please accept the atonement. That's it. Just please accept the atonement. So you would say, if let's say you had a resentment against President Trump or your ex-husband or someone, you would pray right to his soul. President Trump, please accept the atonement, the undoing of any fear that you have, the undoing of any resentments, of any selfishness, of any old past patterns. You understand that's offering the chalice instead of gathering up more evidence of guilt and pressing the crown of thorns deeper into your enemy's head. One of the other things I wanted to talk about a little bit, but it's too late now. It's too late now. Is this Emmett Fox book, The Sermon on the Mount. All of these things, and I keep talking about this all the time. I mean, I'm always sort of the weirdo. I'm not just the weirdo, I'm the weirdo among weirdos. Even among the weirdos, they go, he's really weird. So I'm always kind of the cheese stands alone. So right now in West Hollywood, where I live, they're not having a Pride March this year. They're having a #resist march. Literally, that's what it is. The signs all over town are #resist march. So of course, my whole community sees me as a freak because our whole teaching here is non-resistance. Everything in our spiritual teaching is about non-resistance, that what you resist persists because Jesus said, resist not evil. It is your very resistance. That's that whole, what you resist persists. Because you're feeding it your life's energy by resisting it. So this Emmett Fox book, The Sermon on the Mount, which is a great book because it really is the core. The Sermon on the Mount was basically Jesus' ministry. It was basically him like, I'm just going to give you a seminar here in this mountain that's just going to, dot all the I's and cross all the T's of basically what I'm here to tell you. So it has the Beatitudes, it has all of these things in it, but it's a perfect book to plop things. you know? So you can just have like something going on, you just plop it open and just see what it says. So there's a whole chapter that's called Resist Not Evil. And there was somebody now see, this is how practical all of this stuff is there's these two guys at Starbucks that I resent the fuck out of. Because they are ruining Jacob's morning as he perceives it to be perfect. Okay? So they're super fucking loud and inappropriate and pushy, and they, what I call, hover. So, you know how, like, if you're ready to get up from a table and someone starts fucking hovering? Like, now I have a lot of shit that it takes me a while to pump, but they are so, like, pushy about they have to have certain tables and da-da-da-da, so that I try to not look like I'm leaving. So they can leave quickly enough so that they're not going to stand over my table, hovering over me and shit. And so there's just all these things where they push my buttons. And so I know, well, they're on my list. Like, these two dudes are on my list for me to offer them the atonement, to be in that place of, they wouldn't be annoying me this much if they had not been sent directly from Central Casting. Okay, these people have their script in front of them. It's like, this is what to say and exactly what to do. This is what we should wear. This is how loud we should shout. This is how obnoxious we should be. We should say sexually aggressive things to people who are decades younger than us. We should do just anything that is really going to make this not happy time for Jacob while he sits here and reads his spiritual books. Right? So I'm going to read my spiritual books and just resent the fuck out of these two people who are keeping me from God. Okay? So, do you understand how practical all of this is? That it's so practical because it's not just about the big political things. It's about this dude right here in line in front of you who's wearing the cologne you don't like was sent. Okay? Everything, nothing is fucking random here. Every single thing here. So, I'm sitting there and I'm going, okay, I need to offer them the atonement and see their innocence and look past all of this and know this is just my issue and has nothing to do with them whatsoever, and I've just made up a story and da-da-da-da. And I have I'm like, I need just a little guidance, just something that's not just my own fucking, me counseling myself. So I plop the book open. It opens to page 83. If someone makes himself personally obnoxious to you, do not resist him in thought. Resist not evil. Realize the indwelling Christ inside your enemy, and all will be well. He will cease to trouble you and either change his attitude or else fade out of your life altogether, besides being spiritually benefited by your action. That's the double whammy, isn't it? It's not just that, oh, they're not going to bother me anymore. I'm just going to let them live their lives without me going over into their yard. This is going to benefit them as well. Doesn't that feel good? To just go it's not even that I'm just doing this for me. It actually benefits them. Because I can just tell you that somebody who is like that has probably had other people annoyed by them sometime in their life. Well, they're just living their lives because they are loud and outrageous and make a big scene out of it, and they want attention. They want to be noticed. They want to be paid attention to. They want everyone in the place to see them. And so the Course in Miracles, there's a whole thing early in the Course that says, when a brother insists that you do something that you don't want to do, then you're just as fucked up as they are, because they think their salvation comes from you doing it, and you think your salvation comes from not doing it. So it says, you're basically just bookends on the same fucked up shelf. And so it says basically you have to soften inside. It's not about whether you do the thing or not, but it is about your willingness to see past it. That it not only benefits you, but it also benefits them. And see, that's what we want to do, is that thing where I said in the psychotherapy booklet, it says, you are there to give the blessings and peace in God and to receive the blessings of peace in God. Now, it's none of my business whether they, you know, what happens with them. You know, I'm not going to follow them around and go, did you feel mysteriously happier today? Right, it's none of my business. My business is that you give the gift. You make the extension of, I give you the peace of God, I give you the atonement, I offer it to you. You know, that's my part. What happens to it is none of my business after that. But this is the help that we're given when we're willing to ask for help. When we realize that everything that we think is them is just an opportunity for a miracle. That's what I want you to start thinking about. Everything that bothers me is just an opportunity for a miracle. That's all. This is just the perfect setup for a miracle. This thing that I thought was the last thing in the world that I wanted, this is just a setup for an opportunity for a miracle, for an opportunity for the healing of my mind, a new perception. God, let a new perception come to me, the Course says. So that's that thing in the Course that says one lesson is above all else, I want to see. And then the next lesson right after that is above all else, I want to see differently. Let me see this differently. So, can I just tell you, I haven't had a problem with them since then. Most mornings, they're not there anymore. So we're not on the same schedule anymore. Like when I zig, they zag. And the times when I have seen them, I've already offered them the atonement. Now it doesn't matter what, they come in naked and sit their bare ass up on the fucking table, and I'll be like, God, this is what I love about America. Ain't nobody stopping people from doing what the fuck they want to do. I'm still over here in my yard reading my thing. I'm not here telling the story of, I would have the peace of God if it wasn't for these motherfuckers. Which is what most of us do. It's like, I would have the peace. Helen Schuckman, who scribed the Course in Miracles, would go into a big thing about how life would be so pleasant in her apartment if her husband didn't live there. She said, she literally believed that. Now, she knew she was crazy, but her story basically was, it would be so pleasant here if he didn't live here, because he ruins everything. I came in and his socks were on the dining room table, and then I just ruined my whole fucking day. There's a whole story that she tells in her diary that's in Absence from Felicity about how she would do her exercises. This was the days of exercises in the bathroom. And her husband came in and got in front of her in the mirror and was brushing his teeth and stuff and said, oh, you see, is this bothering you? And she said, no, it's not bothering me. And he said, well, you've looked at me with such hatred, it's hard to believe that it's not bothering you. And she said, I wasn't looking at you with hatred, I wasn't looking at you at all. But in her diary, she said, I was looking at him and I did hate him. Right? Isn't that marriage? So the holy matrimony is the idea of the person who's going to help you heal all this stuff is right the fuck there. Right there. And you can either say, this is one of the reasons that I love that show Modern Family, is because, and this is why opposites attract. Because that's how you learn. You don't learn. Ellen Kreidman used to say, if two people in a relationship agree on everything, one of those people is not necessary. It's like, what's the point? Right? It's the idea that there's somebody different, a different point of view, a different way of doing things. And so that's why opposites attract. That's how you heal the severeness of your personality. So you look at that show, Modern Family, is such a miraculous show in that realm, in the lesson. And I think this is the lesson with most intimate relationships in general. But the lesson that's there every week, if you ever watch the show, just get this. This is the lesson every single fucking week for every single person in this. Because it's all about opposites, right? The children are opposite from the parents, and every one of those couples is two opposites. So there's a very young woman who's married to a much older man. There's the very controlling, anal retentive wife who's with the flibberty-gibbet husband who can't remember, where he's supposed to be 5 minutes. So it's all of this. They love each other. They want to be together. They want this family to continue. So they all have the same lesson every single week, over and over and over again. It's very simple. You could have this tattooed on your arm. It would be very helpful. It is simply this: get over yourself. That's it. If you want this marriage to work, get the fuck over yourself. The fact that you want all the CDs alphabetized and your mate wants to throw them all out on the floor, get the fuck over yourself. Because that's most of the issues we're dealing with. We're not dealing with major issues, most people, of like, my husband is having serial affairs or my wife is gambling at the track every day. That's different. That's not just get over yourself. But most of the things that are our, like, Waterloo every day is his socks are on the table, right? Or he said, oh, he got the milk, but it's not the 2%. I have to do everything myself. Like, get the fuck over yourself, okay? Like, all those ways of offer the atonement, the chalice. Are you really going to crucify because it's the 1% and not the 2%? Or all the things that we just go, life would be so pleasant if you weren't here. Our marriage would be perfect if you weren't in it. Right? Because I want to get rid of the other person and keep the hate. So it's that, might not be that severe. It's just like, I want to get rid of the other person and keep my rightness. Right? Keep my moral superiority or my intellectual superiority or my emotional superiority or whatever it is that we think like we're the one that's right and they're wrong and so on and so forth. So I've harassed you enough for one day. You should just go out and just have endless fucking miracles after this, basically, and you should be glad every time you get pissed off now. Every time something pisses you off, you should go, oh, this is the prelude to a fucking miracle. This is like the once upon a time part of the story. Once upon a time, 2 people came in who were not on Jacob's list of how people should act. Right? That's the once upon a time. Now, let me just tell you one other clue. It'll help you a lot. This cuts everything off at the past of all those stories. This is something you're going to want to write down. You already know this. But write it again. As soon as the story starts about all you have to do is say, the end. That's it. As soon as you notice the story has started in your head, you can just say, the end. Because most of the time, we keep the story going long after it could have stopped. Right? You just go, the end. That's it, the end. Boom, the end. Somebody comes up and they cut in front of line in you and they're just so rude and entitled and you can't believe it. Couldn't they see that you were standing right there and da-da-da-da. The end. That's it, just the end. Instead of like, I'm going to call my friend. Do you know what just happened to me? Right? Or somebody cuts you off. Like, here's what I do. This is so amazing. Is like, every time I almost have an accident, I just go right into it. But it didn't happen, the end. Because do you know how long you usually drive still thinking about how you almost got killed? Instead of just going, and then it ruins that much of your drive because you're thinking about how stupid they are and how careless they are and blah, blah, blah. You hope they don't have children and then, like whatever, you just go in and you just go, but we didn't. We almost died, but we didn't. Like just go right, the end. Just the end. Instead of like, there are people who get together in the family and talk about some casserole dish from 30 fucking years ago. No one even knows where it is anymore, except that there's a lot of resentment in the family about it. Shit like that, where nobody just goes, you know what? The end. And then if you really are super spiritual Olympian, then you say, and they lived happily ever after. That's when you're like really fucking willing to go like, he stole every dime I have and took all my friends and I ended up having to start my life all over again at 65, the end, and they lived happily ever after. Like that's really spiritual Olympics of like, I've decided I'm bored by my own fucking story. And I've run out of recovery groups to tell it at because even they're tired of hearing it. I stand up in front of the group and they roll their eyes, even though they're forced to applaud at the end. They don't even want to hear it anymore. So I'm just going to go straight to the end, and we lived happily ever after. Let's pray. We close our eyes. We take a deep breath. relaxing into that place of the peace of God. Knowing that outside of this peace there is nothing but stories. Within this peace is everything. And in order to dwell in this peace, we have to be willing. We don't have to know how. We don't have to do it on our own, but we must be willing to let be undone all of our evidence that is against ourselves or anybody else. We have to be willing to line up, to align with our greater good, not to try to force it or even to attract it, but to know it's already there. It's already been created by God. The peace, the joy, the love, the communication, the companionship, the abundance, the right work, right place, right time, everything is already there. Our only job is to tune into it, and we are doing this more all the time. We are not creating new resentments and grievances, and we are more and more letting the old ones be undone as we choose to offer the chalice to others and to ourselves, to let go of defending and justifying any attack thought, because we want the gentleness, the mercy, the grace, the peace that is ours by divine right as the sons of God, as the daughters of God, as the light of the world. And so each of us in our own way, if we are willing, pray the simple prayer of, God, I assume you're in control here. I offer you all of my pain, my fear, my limiting beliefs, my worries, my obsession with the future and the past. And I rest in you. Heal my mind. Heal my mind. Heal my mind. Restore me to sanity and peace and joy. And if you have said that prayer, then it's already done. Miracle will follow miracle. Manifestation will follow manifestation. And your path is lit by miracles now. And so we let our small self-will go as we say, let thy will be done in us, as we offer now our hands and our feet and our voices, asking, where would you have us go? What would you have us do and say, and to whom? We remember now, as always, the way that we will know love and the way that we will feel love is by this perfect love moving through us to the world around us. For this we are thankful, and together we all say, amen. You might want to stretch a little bit. Oh, thank you so much. Go have a fabulous, glorious weekend. Thank you for coming. Thank you.